All right, welcome to this part. This is the practical part where I will navigate with you in an actual real life project. I will give you tasks to do. You will have to pause. It's not going to be something that's straightforward. It will be learning by doing. And we will do this together because I want you to experience firsthand what it means to do user research. We will focus on user interviews, it's the most common one, and you will see and dive into this with me. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Why did I call this design thinking? Because user research is actually a mindset that is coming from a bigger mindset, which is design thinking. When you think like a designer, whether or not you are a designer, you don't have to be a designer to do this. When you think like a designer, what is going to happen is that you will build things that are going to make people's lives easier, better, less frustrating. You will build products, services, solutions, tools that people want to use that will be big funds for you to go for and that will pay you money even. So there's a lot of money in design thinking. So I want you to understand design thinking before you understand um, this mindset or this way of doing. So, design thinking is both a mindset and an approach. There is an art and there is a science to it. And you'll see there is a lot of a grayish area that is very hard to explain unless you actually experience it. And that's why we are experiencing it. So, one thing is, I want you to watch a video. So, I will have it linked. It is called It's Not You, Bad Doors Are Everywhere. It's a very important video for you to understand the importance of user research, of design thinking, and doing in this world. So, I will let you take it and understand it and reflect on it, maybe interact on it, and then we'll move to this part. So, design thinking can have many um, applications. So you can apply it in the world of software applications, or you can apply it in the world of um, services. And I mentioned this at the beginning, but usually there are key steps that you need to keep in mind. You can find different namings for this. There is always a discover phase. There is a discover phase that's also called empathize phase or learn phase, or it's really where you discover who you are serving. There are many artifacts that help you, and this is where we said you get to use user interviews, ethnographic research. You use data that's already out there, sources. You can use different ways of discovering who you're serving. And then, so this is where you go wild, and then you go down is the defined phase. This is where you focus on what are you going to solve. There are so many problems, there are so many pain points that you have covered in your discovery phase. Now it's time to define what is it really that you're going to solve for. So the define phase is very important because this is where you build artifacts like a persona, empathy maps. This is where you put all of the learnings that you've gotten from discovery and put them into an actual situation where you can make a decision. And this is usually where we get teams to vote. You let's say you uncovered 5 pain points and you get your team to vote on 2 or 1 and you get them to make a decision that you will solve for this particular one and not that one. It's important to say I'm going to do this and not that. And I put here this little, you can see there is this little refresh icon. Why did I put it in your opinion? It means because you can make a mistake and you can actually come back. You have to be humble. I told you at the beginning, design thinking, user research is about being very humble. Is that you can end up building something or starting to design and then you realize maybe this is not really the problem I'm trying to solve. Maybe the problem is something else. Let me come back to my research and redecide with my team. So remember, it's not linear. Even though it sounds like it's linear, you can see all of these little arrows, they go back and forth, go back and forth. We have design, which is so important. This is where you start making your solution into something. You can start, it's an ideation. So design, it's you have to think about it that it's a split. You split it between a low fidelity and a high fidelity. A low fidelity design means that you start representing your idea first. You use techniques like storyboarding or ideation or user flows or journey maps. And then when you're actually testing those low fidelity artifacts that I just mentioned, you move to higher fidelity, meaning that you start thinking about how can I make this more tangible? How can I bring my idea after I tested it and validated it? Of course, that's where user research is. I start making something that's more of a high fidelity, and we call it prototype or prototype. Prototype is something cheaper than a prototype, but prototype can be something that's close to what you're about to do. Maybe you build together something, it's like a Figma interactive thing if it's an app. Maybe it's a mock-up service that you will test with people. So that's the prototype. It's high fidelity, it's a little bit more costly than a storyboard or a user flow, but it's there. And so when you're ready and you're prototyping, then you again, you iterate, you test it, you test your prototype, you test your lo-fi, you test the lo-fi and the hi-fi artifacts at any point. It's not something that happens once, it can happen many times. And then you come back, you iterate, you incorporate the feedback, and you keep going. And then we have implement. So this is where you take that prototype and you what you do? You bring it to life. You give it an actual look and feel. You actually are confident. You have to have confidence. It's data. You made it. You actually researched. You actually tested your prototype. It's working. Not working? Try again. You keep staying in this phase until you're ready. When you're ready, you implement. Of course, there are people with you. Maybe you have developers. Maybe you have people who need to bring this to life. Maybe you're not really there. Maybe you need to do some what is called a handoff. You hand off your design work. You hand off like an architect. See, architects, when they build, they make a building design. They're not there to build the building. They're there to actually construct and architect it and think about it. And so that's where this is exactly something that is applicable to the architectural world. So implementation doesn't mean that you always have to be there. For example, for in my world of e-learning, sometimes I don't get to create the slides. I hire someone to create slides for me because I know my outline. So I have my outline, I know I'm going to talk about, then I get somebody to create my slides, and so I get to teach. Sometimes, if I'm not teaching and I get someone to teach, then that's another thing where they're almost like helping me. But usually, what it means in my world, implementation means okay, is really bringing that experience to life, from teaching to designing slides to thinking about editing videos. But there is a design there that I have to design. I have to think about what are the steps, what are the key moments in this learning experience, and what is it, the outline that I'm going to talk, what examples I'm going to use. And yeah, so you can see it's applicable to any situation. So think about the situation where you want to apply design thinking and a user research approach. And then obviously you launch. When you implement, again, in implementation, there is iteration. So you test it, you do user tests again, make sure everything is good. You come back to the design phase, your designers or people who worked on the design, it can be you, and you make sure that the implemented solution really looks like the design solution. You make sure, for example, in a software world, that your Figma design and how it looks is exactly how it's looking like in the coded solution. And then what do? You launch. You launch it, it's live to the millions or thousands of people that are going to experience your solution. And so when you do that, what is going to happen is that you can get some post implementation feedback through analytics. So you get Google Analytics set up on your site, or you get to do a survey at the end of your new customer experience, or you get to get feedback from other people. So you see if your solution needs some improvement, and then you do V2, V3, V4, V5, like iPhone. iPhone, we had the iPhone 3. Now you keep on going, you have iPhone 4, 5, 6, 7. There is always room for improvement. But how do you know what to do with iPhone 11? You want to build iPhone 11, but you don't know what is going to happen. You have to go and ask people who used iPhone 10. So that's exactly, this is something that big companies are using. This is not something I'm bringing to you. This is the secret sauce of good services and products and tools. And user research is a very important part of it. And as I have explained it, it's really throughout the whole design thinking process. So, the first step I want you to focus on is really, what problem are we solving? It's the most, it looks natural, it looks normal, but people sometimes don't even know what they're trying to solve for. And that's the biggest challenge with people. That's the biggest challenge, is that you need to focus and realize, okay, what am I trying to build? What is actually, instead of what I'm trying to build, it's what problem am I solving? So, what problem are we solving? So, I am about to invite you to do this practical part. So, this is the problem that you are solving for. It is something that's very important to keep in mind. I want you to think about it in different ways and different manners. But this is the challenge. So, how might we retain and grow women at this ABC software company in a world where women at all levels feel they are not encouraged, supported to bring their authentic selves in order to reach their career aspirations and therefore end up leaving this ABC company? This is a people problem. I have made it my role to not make it into a software or technological problem, because if you can do it with a people problem, you're going to use user research to make a service or create an experience that is going to make these women's lives better. So the challenge is about, it's about women career growth and retention, and I'm sure there are a lot of women in your life, whether or not you are a man, woman, or you identify in different ways. But I want you to focus on this challenge. And I have some assumptions for you. The first one is, assume women have been with this ABC company for a year, that there is no age group or geography, that's it's completely open. Assume there is limited budget. Make sure that you use cross-functional collaboration. This in ABC company has executive ascension. Don't focus on talent attraction for now, but do focus on the the male allies that are out there that can help. So these are all the assumptions, and this is usually how you start with the project. Sometimes you don't get a problem statement like this, you have to go and create it yourself. Sometimes problems are so messy, you just have to make sense of them. So are you ready, set, grow? We'll go into the growing phase. So right now we will get into discovery. So you have to discover who you are serving. And this is where I'm going to ask you to do user interviews. Before you interview, let's do a little intro. I mentioned before that what users say they need is not really what they need. So you can see this is an example. They say they need this, but they really need this. So remember, you do user interviews to unlock and uncover insights that are not superficial. They're really diving deeper and they will need interpretation. Let's see, if you don't use this process, let's see what's going to happen to you. Imagine there is this company that wants to solve for single seat electric cars. They do surveys. Imagine they're doing surveys, and then they end up building this one seat car. But what's going to happen? There is a market failure because we'll see why, but they just not make it. They didn't make it, basically. But imagine if this company decides to go with a different approach, which is design thinking approach. They talk to the end users who are interested in this. They observe them in their natural habitat. They build something that's close, lo-fi or hi-fi. They test it. They test it with them. They see if it's working. They adjust the product. Then they realize that what they really need to build is an e-scooter. So they iterate, they make it better, they test it, and then what happens? There is a market adoption. Why is that? It's because we spoke to people and we knew exactly what they wanted. And that's what they wanted. And we built it for them and we made money out of it. And we spoke in their terms and we spoke in their pain points. So, what is it telling you here? That you're doing user interviews because you don't want to go through this. And I want you to try this process so that you can do it and apply it in other parts of your world. All right, so before you go and start interviewing, you need to make a plan. So you make a plan by creating a user interview guide. I will show you an example in a moment, so don't worry about that part. But usually, outside of this example, I want you to still keep this make a plan thing in your mind because you will have to solve for other problems, right? So, what are you trying to find out and how is the first question you want to answer. Try to craft open-ended questions. So make sure you don't ask questions that involve a yes or no. Make sure that you get stories from people and make sure you recruit people you are designing for. This world of designing should not really make you feel like out of space, out of place, because let me just tell you this, anybody who creates something that other people are going to use is a designer. Whether or not they want to know it or like it, you are a designer. If you create a paper that your professor is going to read, then what? Then you are designing because you're making sure that whatever you're building is for someone else. Whether this is a product, a tool, a paper, a chair, It is something that people are going to use. If you're building something for you, then you are not designing. Maybe you want to be your own designer. There is a famous thing that we say in the design world: we are all designers of our own life. Because you want to, you go, you shower, you clean, you do yoga, you do what you like in life, you make sure your energies are out of toxicity or out of toxic people. So all of this, you are designing a lifestyle. So even you can be the user of it. You can sit with yourself and ask yourself, what do you really want? And so you start adjusting your life based on what are your real wants. But not everybody has this capability of connecting with their real needs. And that's another story for another world. If you're interested to dive into psychology, then stay tuned for more classes on psychology that will be on my account. So, so you make a plan and we'll see how that goes. So you will have to do that. That's your first task. That's your first homework. And then what I will ask you to do is to go and recruit 2 to 3 people in your life, whether they are men or women. And I'll explain this why. So maybe it can be your sister, your spouse, your husband, your uncle, your cousin, people, your colleague, your friend. You need 2 to 3 people because I want you to experience this process. And after we create your interview guide, I want you, as you interview them, to always keep these tips in mind. Make people comfortable, create rapport, thank them for the time that they're spending with you. Make sure you provide frequent eye contact. Um, Make sure that you let people finish their thoughts, because if you're starting to speak, and sometimes when you let them speak, more things come up. So don't limit them in how they can say or how much they can say. Always show empathy, but don't show approval or opposition. Dig deeper, always dig deeper. Why? Tell me more. Observe people. Ask for examples and stories. Observe how they actually interact with you. What's their body language if they are in person? Even online, you can see how their faces are. Take notes. Very important to take notes. And that brings me to this next part, which is note taking tips. If you don't have someone with you taking notes, make sure you are recording. And if you are taking notes after the interview or during the interview, which I don't recommend if you don't have a note taker with you, just interview, focus on interviewing and record. When taking notes, I want you to take notes of anything that's significant. Take quotes and examples. Take surprising information, the unexpected. Mention the positives and negatives. Mention the frustrations or the delights. Mention the tools and the hows. Mention the environment or context. And when taking notes, make sure that you don't put anything verbatim. Make sure you take stickies. You can use, again, I mentioned there are 2 tools. There is Miro, there is the Miro tool, and there is another whiteboarding tool. So both of them can help you. There is FigJam and Miro that can help you turn your notes, maybe they're in a Word doc, into actual sticky notes. And the trick is, for each sticky note, you need to put the data point that is important. There is like a data observation. So each sticky note is one data observation. It's a surprising, it's a quote, it's what works well, it's a pain point, it's a frustration. It's one thing. So there need to be one thing, one idea per point per sticky, and you will know why after. So before you go and interview, I want you to think about creating an interview guide. So pause this video and focus with me here. Maybe read through it and then you can hear me explain things more. So how do you start? So I want you to take a Word doc and create your interview guide. So, hi, my name is, and then you have an interviewer name, and this is note taker. If you have a note taker, thank you for participating in this interview. We appreciate your willingness to share your experiences and insights. The goal of this interview is to gather information and ideas to address the challenge of retaining and growing women at this ABC software company, specifically focusing on creating an environment where women feel supported to bring their authentic selves to work. You see, I have just recreated the same problem. I have just made it more specific and I just like reframed it. Your feedback will play a crucial role in shaping potential solutions. So you give people that social impact aspect so they know that they're doing is actually valuable. It's going to help us do something. And then please feel free to provide honest and open responses. You see, this is where you make them comfortable, make sure they're in a safe space. You can mention that all the information shared is confidential. And remember, there are no right or wrong answers. So, what is tip number one? Is to encourage interviewees to think out loud. That's tip number one. always. If they're just thinking, or especially when you do a user test, this is an interview, but when you do a user test, you want people to tell you what there is in their minds, because that's important. That's not always the case when you're in a superficial interaction. The goal is to get very deep here. Anybody who has an INFJ personality will understand what this means. Very empathetic people understand this, but there is no wrong aspect in anybody who is not very much into the emotions and behaviors of others. It's okay, you can learn. That's why we're here. And then make sure you ask probing questions. If something the participant mentioned warrants deeper insights, always don't stay satisfied with the questions you have prepared. Always dig deeper. This is just an example interview guide. You can create your own. But if you want to go faster, you can use this interview guide and go and do the interviews with it. After that, you have warm up questions. This is where you ask for just overall information, but it's kind of needs to be related to the project. So you can see, okay, can you briefly introduce yourself? What is your role? How long have you been in this company? What does career growth mean to you? So whether or not this is a man or woman you're talking to, it's good. And then this is where you get into core questions. This is are the meat of your work. This is what you're trying to find. You can see I put here too women interviewees and manager interviewees. If you have women, then you can ask them directly about their experience. What have you experienced that positively impacted your career growth and advancement at this company? When do you feel you are growing at this company? What is challenging? So there is plus and minus. You see, I don't have a lot of questions because I know I will ask follow up questions and I'll have to dive deeper. And obviously, these interviews last between 30 to 45 minutes to 1 hour. So you have to get the most out of people's time. If you had one wish for your career growth, what would that be? So this is where you ask them for solution ideas. See? So it's going from positive, negative aspects, challenges, pain points, and then solution ideas from people. And obviously, you need to dive deeper. You shouldn't be satisfied with the top level. And then we have the manager interviewee. If you're talking to a manager who is involved in the growth of women, so it can be a man or a woman in a manager position, you can adjust your question. You always need a plan. If you're talking to a man, that you can likely ask these questions, or you can just adjust the questions to apply to how do they see women colleagues grow or not, how do they see themselves supporting or not their career growth, what is there that is not understood by these men or allies. They want to help, but they don't know how. You need to uncover things. And obviously, you have to close the interview. Make sure you always open up. Would you like to add anything else? Any thoughts? Thank you very much. And then you give people this space. Silence, as uncomfortable as it can be, just you need to sit with the silence. Sometimes people need to collect their ideas. So give them that space so they can give you the data that you're looking for, the qualitative data. So you can see all these questions are very open ended. There is no yes or no. There is a lot of what, there is a lot of how, there is a lot of if. There is one question that I love particularly. The it is called the magic wand question. It's a good one where you want to get answers about solution ideas, but you usually never ask people for solutions directly. You just see what would have been there that can help them, and that can inform your decision later on. But I want you to keep in mind that, again, the Ford example, if you ask people what did they want, they would say, we want faster horses. But people actually, what do they want? They want a car. They want a machine that's automated, don't have to worry about it. It's not an actual creature. You know what I mean? So you always need to ask, but still have that little skepticism in the back of your mind, because you will have to make up the solutions by yourself. So you can ask for ideas, but not for real solutions. The solution is you. If you're a designer, you're going not to put together the solution. If you're a user researcher or just a researcher, you take this, you take all of these insights and you give them to your designers or who are going to build the solution. So it really depends on where you are. Sometimes UXers, we call them UXers, or people in general who are in the user experience, customer experience, service design experience, architect, anybody who builds things for others. They have two hats. Sometimes they research and design, sometimes they just design, sometimes they have an in-house designer. So you know what I mean. Now it's your turn to interview users. So I want you to take a moment, work on your interview guide, take a Word doc, watch what I just mentioned, review all the pre-made interview guides. As I mentioned, if you're working with someone, you can have a larger team, but this is obviously for people who are going to become user researchers or want to work in this space. And then obviously you can interview by yourself. You can have someone take notes with you, interview 2 to 3 people, spend 30 to 45 minutes with the people you're going to work with. And remember, you can have different people. You have to adjust your questions based on who you are talking to. Are you talking to a manager or individual contributor? Are you talking to a woman or men? You saw how we built and crafted the questions. This is your time to craft questions, do the interview. And remember, interviewers, what do? You ask why, you get stories and examples, you ask tell me more, and you make sure you summarize. When they tell you something, you summarize and say, did I actually get it, or was there something else that you wanted to say? So you always summarize things. For interviewees, make sure that you tell them to think out loud. There is no right or wrong answer, that their experiences and opinions is what matters here. Confidentiality, no names or no sensitive confidential information. So when you're done with interviewing, take a break and we'll be back for what's next. Hopefully, you'll enjoy this process and let us know how it goes. All right, so hopefully, you had a good experience with interviewing. Now it's time to do some analysis and synthesis. The goal is, as I mentioned, hopefully you took notes, you worked on your stickies. If not, you have to create stickies. Use Miro. There is Miro, and there is also another tool called FigJam that can allow you to work on creating those stickies. Each sticky should have one data point, one observation. It could be a surprising info, a pain point, one idea per sticky, basically, and just what stands out. Don't work exactly what this person said. Hopefully, you were able to record. And now we're diving into defining. This is where you focus. You went wild, now you focus and say, okay, I'm defining the real problem. I'm defining what's happening. Usually, you want to put the problem in perspective. Here, this is where you learn about the problem and you do a problem reframing. But not everybody does that. So, I still want you to think about it if you want to reframe the problem. You want to say, okay, this person needs a way to, in order to, in a world where there is a problem, a benefit, a challenge, an opportunity. So after you spoke to people, then you can actually capture the problem in more specific terms. Remember, I had given you an actual challenge that was broad enough on purpose. Now that you spoke to people, maybe you don't need this anymore. You need to be more specific on what is really the problem. Why maybe are these people not being able to express their authentic selves? Why are these women not growing? What is it that's preventing them from it? So you can actually reframe the problem. And that's where you do the definition that I just mentioned. So now I want you to think about analysis. So, a part of it is analyzing really and diving deeper. It's to uncover the insights, uncover what's really out there, what's beyond words. So you can see here there is an example. I do care about my goals, but above all, I want to know how I am helping people. So what does this mean? This means that people are looking for impact on team colleagues and team members. This is also called tagging or coding. You can code things. So you're coding what people are saying. And sometimes with Miro, you can actually tag this as a pain point, a challenge, a delight, a frustration, a solution idea. So you can actually add an actual tag for each very small sticky. And this happens also in real life. So you can tag things or you can color code. If you use yellow, it means all of these are problems. If you use pink, it means these are the lights. If you use black color, this means that these are kind of interesting findings. You know, there are different color coding, but obviously, what you're doing is you're turning what you found out into interpretation. So, see, it's important for me to have a clear vision of how I'm doing affects real people. So, this is where the insight is, how does my role impact my goals? I want a line of sight between my role and a VP mom. So, you go from data to interpretation, from data to facts. See? So you're not accepting the superficiality or diving deeper. This is where I told you those stickies can help you. And you can turn maybe even a recording, a Zoom transcripts of your recording. You can highlight things. People use highlighters and then they create stickies. So that's your first part. It's analyzing the recording and data and going back to your notes. And then what you do is you synthesize. So you cluster your post-its into themes, whether it's digital or whether it is not digital, it's real life. So you put them, see, this is a real life thing. You put what people said that is in common and you give it a theme or give it an actual category, and then you can give this whole big, like these two categories, you can give them a bigger title or a bigger meaningful title, which is here the developers need a way to interact with their design team so they can prototype faster. And then there are two categories in this big theme, which is communication and translation. So you can see that how this works. It can be very deep. You can have one theme with multiple categories or one theme with one category. And yeah, this is how it works. So I want you now take an hour 45 minutes, and I want you to share do this analysis and synthesis, and do it in real life or not, and then share with us how this went. So next is this is where we just went with defining, and we're still in defining. See, it's the most important part. This is where I want you to focus on turning all of those insights and clusters that you found into creating a persona. What is a persona? Very fancy term again. Don't have to worry about it because you took this class. So, user personas are actually fictional characters that represent the key characteristics, needs, goals, and behaviors of a specific target user group. So, the reason why we create personas is very simple. It's because one reason, we human beings, we forget. So even if you did all of this, you did all of this work, all of these interviews, in 2 months you will forget what you just said. You will lose what we call the empathy. And empathy is the most important part in design and research, user research in particular, or customer research, or any other people related research. That's reason number one. The second reason is, as you are working on your project, you want to come back to your persona. Your persona is a reference, it's a fictional, symbolic representation of who you are serving. It's an actual fictional character, it doesn't exist, but it actually summarizes the psychological, demographic, pain points profile that summarizes all the people that you've been talking to. It shouldn't have any contradictions, but it should only keep what is common between all of the people that you spoke to. It's almost like you created a baby out of different people. Like you have 7 people you spoke to, you have one baby that represents them. And that's your persona. So that's the second reason. The third reason is because you get to work with people who didn't do interviews with you. That's I'm talking about real life projects, not startuppers, not people who want to build digital projects. I'm talking about real life corporate projects, user research projects where you get to work with people, and people don't have that same empathy. People didn't sit with you in interviews. Some people have their other roles that involve coding, engineering, logistics, program management. I don't know. They have other stuff going on. They're not you. They're not the researcher. So you have to have that persona. It's almost like a spiritual guide. It's something that you put. Maybe it's the background. It's in your whiteboards. It's in your office. It's some, and there are a lot of design teams have their personas on the wall. So they come back to them, they refresh their minds, they rebuild that empathy, and they teach others about them. Like in case something happens in 2 years, somebody comes and wants to build this new feature in your solution, what is going to happen? You need to come back and say, okay, let me just think. Should I just do another discovery research or just come back to my research and persona and realize that actually I can make a decision off of that? So it saves you time as well. So, personas, what do they do? Why do we have them? I just focused on it, but I want you to understand that they help you focus, they help you make decisions in confidence, and they help you convince other people who did not go with you, and they help you defend the end user. They help you understand the needs, and because it's a summary exercise, when you work on a persona, it's actually intellectual, it's cognitive. You have to think about how can I summarize all of what I just found out from these interviews into one condensed thing. It's a summary. What's important? What stood out? What should I keep in mind? And then obviously you have to understand their needs and you need to keep in mind what they're trying to achieve. So now I want you to go and work on this persona template. So just put this. This is very basic. You can go and research personas online. There are plenty of examples on Google. But this persona templates, you need to say, okay, the persona name is about me, my needs, my motivations, problems I face. And I want you to create your persona based on your emerging themes from interviews. And then pick one or two problems and needs that you will solve. All. This is what I'm saying define. You know, when you define, so fill out this, create a PowerPoint or whatever tool you're using, or even in pen and paper, and summarize everything in this persona based on the clusters you found out. What is it about it? You give it an actual name, and it should represent all the people you spoke to. Anything that is contradicting, you take it off. You go with everything that's common. Their needs, the motivations, the problems. That's the most basic persona you can build. There are personas that become super specific to the problem, but you don't have to worry about it. Now we're talking about UX research 101. And then when you're done, I want you to take a voting dot or just in your mind and say, okay, out of all of these problems that I have uncovered, this is the one problem I'm going to solve for. Make that decision, and that's it. Then we'll move to the next stage. All right, so hopefully you're done with persona making. Now we will go into designing. So persona is one of those artifacts that you would use to define. There are other artifacts that you can dive into depending on your projects. There is journey mapping to understand if you're trying to improve a process, for example. So you can define what's actually happening today. So when you move to design, you can end up realizing that this is so what you want to build. So this is like very important for you to understand that an artifact, a user research artifact comes in as a need. It's not something that you would just add because you heard it should be used. Persona is the most common one for interviews. But imagine you're doing interviews to understand a process and then because you want to improve the process. So maybe persona is not what you will use in the define phase. Maybe you need to use a journey map, user journey map. So see this, it really depends on where you are. So now we dive into designing. So let's recap. You did the discovery. So you are in a situation where you discovered who you are serving, you understood their pain points, their problems, their delights. Now you are in the defining phase, meaning that you are defining what is it really that you are trying to solve for, what is really the problem, what is the insight, what is the actual situation. And you used persona as a way to summarize your insights. Now it's time to ideate. We call it design, but really design has many phases in it. There is ideation, there is visual representation of your ideas in a flow or in a storyboard. There is wireframing, where you start working on some look and feel. You start to give your solution life through sketching or basics, cheap ways. Then obviously you test things, and then you start when you validate your wireframes or sketches, then you start prototyping or making it into a higher fidelity prototype, and then you start working on implementation, which is the next phase. So design is not just design. It's really many tasks that are happening that are also called in the design world jobs to be done. So design, ideation, and storyboarding. So I want you now to go from the problem that you saw, that you identified from the pain points of your persona. We call them pain points, it's really problems. And then you just start to think about how are you going to solve it. Imagine and using all of the insights that we said, how can you will you help these women? How can you help this company improve how they help women grow and retain them? So that's really what you're trying to achieve. Remember, this is the goal. But before the goal, you have to understand who you are helping. And you understood that hopefully. So now I want you to take a moment and imagine, think about the key moments of that journey that will address the user needs. So, with the user's goal in mind, brainstorm what this user, what these women will see, do, and feel when they experience your solution. Focus on the needs and motivations you uncovered. Keep track of questions you want to ask users during user validation. So, remember, this is a time for you to think about experience. It's always about experience, whether you're building an app, you're building a chair, you're building whatever. It's an experience. So, think about bring in your end user, your persona, think about your persona always. How will you make them shift from being in a situation of experiencing that problem to a situation where they have a happy ending and where their problem is solved? So imagine it's like a story. Imagine all the steps, all the key moments, all the features, all of the moments that your experience or solution is going to give them so that they go from problem to solution. So think about that experience. And as you are working on those steps, I want you to think in terms of steps. And for each step, you can draw, you can write things. It's really open. You can use even like some storyboarding artifacts. You can just make a flow first. You can just put steps one after the next. For each step, they find what the user sees, does, and feels. And then if you want to visualize, which I highly recommend, is for you to visualize that experience and put like a little character with how they think, so you can do a little bubble, their feeling, you can show your experience, maybe it's an app, you can show how it's going to look like. See, this is very much like a form. And then see, this is how it works. You have to think about creating that experience and just imagine it. So you can go from steps to user sees, feels, thinks for each step, and then visuals. There is an SAP scenes kit that you can use. It's a PowerPoint one. You can have it in different PNG formats. Miro has a lot of templates for storyboarding. So this is just an example of one. I just want to show you that it doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to be cheap and it has to express exactly these steps. So spend 45 minutes to 1 hour to turn your ideas of that problem that you identified in your persona list into an actual brainstorming situation. And storyboarding is one of those brainstorming tools that we use. All right, so now that you worked on your first, let's say, concepts, I won't call it storyboards, it's the concept of your solution. You started thinking about it, you gave it life, you thought about the key moments that will bring your persona from zero to hero, from problem to solution. Now I want you to go and validate your concepts because that's the importance. You never have to think about you, because if you start seeing you, it means you're not designing anymore for others. So you have to go back to the people you spoke to. Ideally, it's better to speak to other people, 2 to 3 people, show them your solution. Hopefully they are women, they are experiencing what you're experiencing. If it's something that you've built that other people will experience, like a manager, men, other people in the company, then you can involve other users of that solution. Your solution should not, again, your solution should not be an app or website. It can be a service, it can be an event, it can be a moment, it could be a tool, it could be a website, it could be an app, it could be an object. So remember, you don't have to be designing here because obviously this course is about user research, but sometimes you can just use an existent solution that you found somewhere and then you can test it and validate it, because that's what I want you to focus on, is validation. So how do we do validation? Validation is where you test out alternate ideas to your concepts. You check your assumptions, you check that you really built something that is mapping to the problem you uncovered. You discard concepts or ideas that are not desired. You uncover new ideas. You help to stay focused on your persona and needs. And you can see this is a funny visual. I love it. You can see that you have an interviewer here and you see someone who just like, it's sometimes it's painful. It takes a lot of heart to show something that somebody tells you is complete crap. And it's okay. That's exactly what you want, because you don't want to realize that it's crap after you've built it and launched it to life. So I want you to focus on this. I want you to go ask people in your surroundings and just tell them, what do they think about this? Hopefully they are a part of your end users of that solution. I mention end users because sometimes the solution may not be for the persona but will impact the persona life. So if you built a solution for women, then it's good that you spoke to the women directly. But if the solution involves other people in the surrounding of those women in that market, in that workplace, then you will have to interview other people. Whoever is going to interact with your solution should be interviewed. So 2 to 3 people, please, from your network. And how do you validate? So powerful. I'll take a moment. I'll let you take a look at this and I'll come back. I'll stay with you. I'll take a sip. Okay. Hopefully you saw the meme. So you can see user research is really not about you. You have to take off your ego. And that's why sometimes we take off designers when we don't want them to go and test their designs. We take them off. Why? Why do we take them off? We take them off because they started to be attached to their solution. And that's the problem. So that's why we have user researchers who just are there to take their solution and bring it to a reality check. So when you do validation, you don't want opinions, because when you have an opinion, you don't have a solution to the problem that people are targeted. If people tell you it should not be like that, it should not, they need to give you an actual, they need to really give you an actual alternative to how you can fix it. And that's why you have to ask them the right questions. If they tell you, I don't want this, this is not good, tell them what would make it good. See? So that's the therapist in you. What would help you in your work is, and people also say, okay, I don't get this. So remember, this is where your user researcher hat should be. Hopefully, you're gonna test something that you've built. I made you storyboard just so you can connect to the design space. I know that this course is about user research, but you can test something that's you found somewhere on the internet, like a solution that you think is fitting with the problem you uncovered. But it's better to do make something and then test it. It's gonna help you build that habit. So again, same thing. What would help you? So you can actually show them your storyboard or flow of moments and show them like each moment and then see what they think about it. Because obviously you wouldn't have built something that's interactive. So you don't have to move from one moment to the next. Make sure that you are in a moment and that you make sure you get all the feedback and tell them what would you do next? What do you think is going to happen next? What's the next moment? And this is all about getting feedback. It's really open. Validation is very open. It's not a structured research method like user interviews that are usually structured or you have a plan, etc. But you can always go unstructured. So don't sell. Make sure you don't sell. Actively observe. Because if you start selling your solution and explain it, it means you're completely not getting feedback and your solution has serious problems. Encourage users to think out loud. Make sure you walk them through each step. I mentioned this. Don't clarify things. Let them explain how things are confusing and why. Follow up with questions and take notes. Take notes, take notes, take notes, please, and record. So before you validate, greet your user, provide context, what you found out, explain what you want from them, encourage them to think out loud, introduce your solution overall, and then walk them through each stage in the storyboard or whatever concept you came up with. I don't want you to focus too much on what you built. Some people would have sketched things, others would have written like a diagram, others would have done scenes as a storyboard. So it really depends on what you did. You can maybe use something that you already have used or found online. But the goal again is to practice user research here. That's why you're here. So, and then just focus because you don't want them to provide feedback that's overall. You want to be very, very, very specific about what is it that you're looking for. So, always ask questions like, ask alternatives. If you're showing a moment in your solution or experience, ask alternatives. What would be an alternative thing, an alternative solution? Did our idea resonate? Is our solution flow making sense to you? Did we miss anything? Always humble, no ego, always humble, because you never know what is good for people until they tell you, and suggest more ideas and alternatives. So always let them suggest those ideas. So take a moment, go do 2 to 3 validation interviews. It should be around 30 to 45 minutes again per validation, even shorter sometimes if you have to discard a complete concept. All right, so you got your feedback hopefully, and you are now ready to test and iterate. Um, you just tested your concept, storyboard, flow, whatever you want to call it. Now it's important to take that feedback into consideration. You have to make that executive decision again of deciding whether or not you want to implement what feedback and what not to implement. You want to think about how do you want to pitch your solution. So make sure you incorporate feedback. Sometimes you realize that what you did was not really right, so you have to redo everything. Hopefully you were close, and that's why you did the discovery, the interview, so that whatever you built was connected with end user needs, so you can adjust it. And then hopefully that's where in the real world you get to pitch your solution to actual people. And maybe it's stakeholders, maybe it's your colleagues, so that you can see if your solution can be brought to life. In this sense, this one was a maybe a service that you built, a website, a tool. You can even show it to people who will bring it to life. So you can choose always. Stories are all about things that make people connect with it and make them, their hearts and souls connect with your story, so they can hear you and they listen to you when it touches them. Remember how you can touch your end user, how you can touch your audience with the story. How can you bring them to understand and feel the feelings that your end user persona that you have uncovered? How can you bring them into that tableau, into that context, into that landscape, so they know what is it that you built and how connected with is it? And then obviously, you need to prepare that story. So I'll just give you like just a tip. It's very overall and high level. It's important to mention the what, the who, and the how. The what is, what is the problem did you decide to address? So don't mention how you got to it, just say this is the problem, and maybe you don't have to say it that way. I showed you here there is a drama, there is a then, there is a that. So that. You start with drama, you get it into your story, into how the persona is experiencing its current state. What is the real problem that's happening? And then you walk us through exactly your story with the beginning, a middle, and end, from introducing the players at the beginning, build towards their biggest problems, and how your solution delivers that happy ending. How is it actually solving the problem? So be creative. There is really no right or wrong answers. I mean, there's an art and science. A lot of user researchers get to do storytelling. So just keep that in mind, please. And obviously, prepare to share your solution with the world, with your team. So try to in this course in particular, it would be great for you to record yourself actually doing this, actually doing a presentation on your solution and how you actually helped your end user. Um, Keep it under 4 minutes, and if you want you can record yourself, send me, you can upload it to YouTube as an unlisted video and send me in the community your link so I can give you feedback. You can practice with actual members of your family or your team, and hopefully you are going to practice this process in real life. If you're building a startup or a project, I want you to focus on preparing how you can pitch it if you have investors or anyone. So think about it. Remember that you have everything. You have all of the tools and all of the skills. Please don't feel that you are not confident enough, please. You are confident enough. You can do this, because it's very important for you to understand that there is a lot of common sense that gets into building things more than common practice. A lot of common sense. You are the expert. You interviewed people. You dive deeper. You did the analysis. You did the synthesis. And you will know best how to express what you found out, because now there is your heart that was in it. And when the heart is in it, the words come effortlessly. So you can always choose to go with a story or go with a role play. A story is always like walking people through moments. A role play is more powerful. You can role play it with someone else. You can use AI, like you can use Synthesia to create an AI voice that will answer you back, and you can showcase. It's more powerful, especially for startuppers. So do use that, please, and let me know how it went. And remember, there are key criteria that we usually have when working on a good presentation. So focus on, empathy, utility, and innovation. Does your team understand their targets women's career growth? Like, did you actually understand the problem? What is the innovative aspect? What's new? How useful is your solution for career growth and retention? This is particular to the challenge. Did the presentation cover the user needs and solution concepts in a convincing manner, or not really? So that's where you are. Hopefully, you learned a lot. And I want you to practice all of these. You see that my courses are always very practical, so focus on this aspect, and I'll show you a real life projects after this, so you can actually see how things are in real life, how messy and crazy this can be. And I hope you had an enjoyable course experience. Please share with me your projects, your solution concepts, your end presentations, so I can actually give you feedback and you can learn and progress, because we always learn by doing. All right, thank you for following along. And so, if you want to address any section in the course, any visual, any tips, anything you want to keep in handy, and especially if you want to follow along with all the steps, you can find the slides of the course in the description below, and it's free. You can download them, and you can also see if there is any template you can download, any link that I am linking in the slides. You can access it there. All right.